1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Welcome to NHL Quick Hits. I'm David Crosby here with Steele Roden. And with the first 2 weeks of the NHL season complete, the panic is starting to set in for some struggling teams and some struggling fantasy owners out there. We're going to look at which team should be mashing the panic button a little later in this episode. But let's first address those panicked fantasy players. It's early, and all it takes is a few smart moves and a little bit of patience to turn your season around. And Steele and I are here to help you decide which moves you should make depending on your situation. So overall, Steele, our suggestions for players to add last week, they were pretty productive, at least those who stayed healthy. Ducks rookie Mason McTavish went down early in the week, and Jeff Carter joined him on the shelf due to COVID protocol. But Bowen Byram and Moritz Seider had provided some nice all-around production on the back end there. Eric Chernak delivered the hits that you promised, and of course Marcus Foligno and Dustin Brown extended their hot starts. If you held on to Senators goalie Anton Forsberg, that should pay off this week and maybe longer after Matt Murray went down with an injury in Ottawa's tough 3-2 loss to the Rangers. And Michael Bunting scored, but he and Rasmus Sandin, they both disappointed in what was an absolutely terrible week for the Maple Leafs. And we're going to get into that a little bit later, Steele. I'm almost certain that you have a few things to get off your chest about the Leafs. But similar to last week, we want to highlight players that should be available in most fantasy leagues. So, Steele, let's start with players owned in 50% or fewer.
Yeah, for my 50% or fewer rostered across Yahoo fantasy leagues, I've got Chandler Stephenson of the Las Vegas Golden Knights. I think he's going to get a lot more playing time because of the amount of injuries that Vegas is dealing with right now. I really liked how he played last season for the Vegas Golden Knights. I think he's going to be a great attribution or asset to your team if you pick him up. 4 points in 4 games for him, 38.40 fantasy points for Chandler Stephenson. He is a second-line center right now. I think once those injured guys come back, he will start to produce a little bit more because you are missing guys like Mark Stone and Max Pacioretty. Right now, currently, he's on the first power play unit. He's on the second penalty kill unit as well. He's going to get tons of playing time, and he started the season really, really well. So I think a guy like Chandler Stephenson can be a great asset for your fantasy league team.
I love that pick. Stevenson's really starting to earn my respect with his play out there. I was a little bit skeptical that he might be one of those guys who is just carried by having good line mates. I think we've all seen that, where once they get off of a good line, their production tails off. But I think he's kind of shown that maybe he can handle a little bit of that on his own. And like you said, the upside's definitely there once guys like Mark Stone and Max Pacioretty come back. I cheated a little bit here, Steele, and I'm really sorry. -1 for me right off the bat. But this guy has just been way too good not to bring up just because of a couple percent. Our cutoff's 50%, but PierreLuc Dubois is 52%. And I'm going to take that hit just to make sure that people go out and scoop this guy up off the free agency or waiver wire. Dubois is finally showing why the Jets were willing to part with a talent like Patrick Laine to go get him. Dubois is riding a 4-game point streak. He has 4 goals, 2 assists, 6 penalty minutes, 2 power play points, 5 hits, and 6 blocks already. That type of all-around production, it's really hard to find in a forward. And as long as Mark Scheifele remains out of the lineup due to COVID protocol, Dubois is going to continue to get a ton of looks on the power play and plenty of offensive zone starts. Now, I also believe Winnipeg's top 6 is good enough that he'll continue to produce once Scheifele returns. We talked about that in the season preview. They have a nice, solid top 6 there, and I think Dubois is going to do just fine this season after a rough start last year in Winnipeg. As a little bonus, the Jets have 3 games that should bring a ton of offense in week 3. They're going on a California road trip playing Anaheim, LA, and San Jose. Not exactly any defensive juggernauts there. Moving on to players owned in 30% or fewer of leagues. And Steele, I promise I stayed under that threshold this time. Who do you got?
Well, first, before I get into the 30%, I'm actually glad that you brought up PierreLuc Dubois, even though you're a couple percentages overwards. So not -1 for you. I'd actually give you a +1 on there. I'm actually really surprised that he's only owned on 52% of the rosters over across the entire Yahoo NFL league. So to me, that's surprising. I thought he'd be up by the 65 or at least 70, just because we can all talk about this. He struggled with John Tortorella behind the bench in Columbus, and that's exactly what happened last year with Patrick Laine. Now both these guys seem to be really stepping up their games and being that top 3 draft pick that we saw when they went in their draft year. But to my 30% owned in the fantasy league, I've got Jakob Silfverberg of the Anaheim Ducks. This guy, he struggled over the last couple of seasons for the Ducks. As we all know, the Ducks have not been one of the best teams over the last 2 seasons. But I believe the draft, looking back at it now, in the draft and week 1, it would have been a little bit premature to take a guy on a struggling team. But just because he's on a struggling team doesn't mean he's not going to produce points. I think now is the time to pick up a guy like Jakob Silfverberg. 5 points in 6 games, 47.60 fantasy points, 14 shots, 3 hits, 4 blocks. Again, he only had 16 points in 47 games last year. He has struggled. I'm not going to deny that. It's something to look into. But so far at the beginning of the season, he's really stepped up his game, and he's helped the Anaheim Ducks off to a decent start.
Yeah, the Ducks have been really surprising offensively, and there's actually a couple of guys there that I think people have been scooping off the waivers. Cam Fowler, Kevin Shattenkirk, and this probably isn't going to last. I mean, Silfverberg has a little bit more of a pedigree of production than those 2 guys do. They're kind of hot and cold, but I think you're right. I think he's taking advantage of a good opportunity there. Maybe they're not going to be a great team in the win column, but they could certainly produce some offense. I could see that happening this season. I'm going with Andrew Kopp, another guy in the Jets' top 6 here, and he's only 27% owned despite racking up 3 goals, 2 apples, 2 PIMs, 2 hits, 5 blocks, and a sparkling plus-minus of +4. Steele, I truly believe that Kopp is one of the most underrated players in the league. Nobody ever talks about this guy. After a gradual uptick in offensive stats his first 4 seasons in the league, he exploded with 39 points in just 55 games last year, thanks to 12 power play points. He finally got that opportunity. He proved he could score in college, and he just needed that chance with the Jets. Tough top 6 to crack, but I think he's locked in there now. He's back on that top power play unit. He's on the first line this season as well. And once they get Scheifele back in the mix, I think Kopp should easily set career highs in almost every category this season. Get this guy right now before he becomes a household name. And after finishing up here with our under the radar ads, players owned in about 15% or fewer fantasy leagues. Who's up first for you, Steele?
Yeah, I've got Danton Heinen of the Pittsburgh Penguins, under 15% owned across the board here. Again, another one of those players who struggled over the last couple of years, but has really found his groove with the Pittsburgh Penguins, especially with all the injuries that they're dealing with right now. 5 points in 5 games, 47 fantasy points so far this season. I think he's done a tremendous job so far, filling in those spots that the Pittsburgh Penguins really need him to fill in right now. And again, I think he's really found his game early on in the season right now, and he's really going to start producing because of all those injuries that Pittsburgh has been dealing with so far early in the season.
Love that pick too, Steele. I considered Evan Rodriguez a multi-positional forward there with the Penguins. I think you can find real value in Pittsburgh right now with some of their top guns out. They just keep rolling. I don't know how long to expect this to last, but it doesn't seem like they're slowing down anytime soon. So you should definitely jump on some of those under-rostered guys who are getting that opportunity in the top 6. I went with Zack Kassian, and right now he is 16% owned. When I first went into this, he was 15% owned. So cut me a little slack there,
Hey, cut slack. Slack.
Thank you. I couldn't pass him up. He's too interesting of a player to me, especially for managers in banger leagues. If your league awards hits and penalty minutes and Zack Kassian is not on, go get him right now. He's rostered in, like I said, 16% of leagues. He has 5 points in 4 games. That's the same number that he had in 27 games last year. So you're probably saying this guy's offense is bound to drop off anytime now, but he actually had a huge dip in production last year. He might get back on track for a point every 2 or 3 games this season, which he had in the couple seasons before his injury shortened one last year. So being on Edmonton's deadly power play, best in the league right now, I think to me that's just the cherry on top of his peripheral stats. 6th in the league in both penalty minutes with 18 and hits with 23. He might not be a big add to start the week either because the Oilers only play twice. So if you want to get a guy who plays Monday, Tuesday, and then add Kassian on Wednesday before the Oilers play, I think that'll be well worth your time because Edmonton also plays 3 times in the first 5 days of next week. So you could get 5 games in a nice 10-day span there with Zack Kassian. Let's move on from fantasy now, Steele, and we'll start with a little segment called the Panic Meter on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being an all-out frenzy of panic, and 1 being completely unconcerned. As promised, we are going to start with the Maple Leafs, who lost 3 games last week and 4 of their last 5, most notably an embarrassing 7-1 rout by the Penguins Saturday night, who were missing a ton of players, including Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang, and Jeff Carter. Jake Muzzin called the loss inexcusable. Steele, where did the Leafs land on the panic meter for you?
For me, it's about a 5 right now, and I use the word antsy and shifty. I'm in the last couple of days, I've been pacing, I've been shifting on the couch, I can't get comfortable, and Jake Muzzin's right. It's inexcusable the way that they have played over the last couple of games. And there's a big problem when Jason Spezza is your best player to start the season. And that's what I've seen so far. He has been the best player, and he's been lights out, really carrying this Toronto Maple Leafs offense on the fourth line, which is really, that fourth line has been absolutely incredible. They've been the best line for the Toronto Maple Leafs so far in the first 5 games, 6 games that they've played, but it's inexcusable. Marner 1 point in 6 games, Matthews 0 points in 3 games for him. So to me, I turned the game off when it was 4-1. I couldn't watch anymore. So I'm at about 5 right now. I'm shifty, I'm antsy, I can't get comfortable. And this is how I felt, and how many Toronto Maple Leaf fans have felt over the last couple of seasons. To me, they need to get their heads on straight. They need to get their heads out of the gutter, and they need to start playing hockey, and their top guys need to start producing.
I think 5's the perfect number right now. The media and a lot of fans are freaking out, but after seeing blown 3-1 leads in the playoffs, and when you consider it's to the second week of the regular season, no, the panic's not going to be too high yet. If this continues for another week or two, now we're talking. People are going to be frothing at the mouth, begging to get some of these guys out. I'm glad you brought up Jason Spezza, too. He was probably the best player against the Canadiens in their playoff loss last year, too, in the first round. It's crazy how good he's been and how they're getting, production and contributions from depth players. It's just those top guys seem to all go cold at the same time. And it is really frustrating how streaky this team can be. Now, we discussed Montreal's terrible start last week. They finally got their first win of the season. Cole Caulfield actually got a point, so we're going to let them enjoy that win and instead move on to one of only 2 winless teams left, along with the lowly Arizona Coyotes, which there's no panic in Arizona. They meant to lose this season, so we're not even going to bother talking about them. The surprisingly terrible Chicago Blackhawks, though, they don't even own their own first-round pick. They went 0-4-1 in their first 5 games, and they have a -12 goal differential. What's your panic meter rating for the Hawks?
It's at about a 3 right now, mildly concerned. Again, it's too early in the season to actually get real concerned, just like the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's why I had a 5 for them. But for me, it's at a 3, mildly concerned for the Chicago Blackhawks. Like you said, 0-4-1 to start the season, which I did not even expect close to this to start their season with this record. But again, I think it's the mix of having new players on the team, getting old players back like Jonathan Toews. I think it's just a mixture of chemistry right now, really trying to find, get on the same page and get their game going at the same time. It's not that they played terribly. Marc-Andre Fleury's played terribly, don't get me wrong there, but the team itself hasn't played the worst. It's just, again, I think it's a lack of chemistry right now. I think they'll get things I think they'll get things going very shortly in the next week or so. And it's too early to panic right now, so it's about a 2 or a 3 for me.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I mean, I might personally bump it up to a 5 or a 6 just because they don't have that first round pick. kind of the language coming out of the front office has changed a little bit, talking about patience and putting the guys together that haven't played together so much. Marc-Andre Fleury hasn't really looked like himself yet. I don't know. It's really hard to say what's going to happen here in Chicago. They've got a huge game Sunday night against Detroit. If they can't beat the Red Wings and they drop another one here, I think people are going to start freaking out a little bit, because it hurts a lot more when, maybe you're not one of the favorites, but when you give up so much to try to not go all in, but make your team better, and it looks like you've done it, and then all of a sudden these guys struggle right out of the gate, you do not want to give a top 3 pick to another team, especially in the draft this year with some of the talent that's coming through. Our last panic meter team is maybe the most surprising. Heading into their Sunday night clash with the Islanders, the Vegas Golden Knights are 1-3 with a -7 goal differential right now. They've only beaten the expansion Seattle team to open the season. Reports on Mark Stone indicate he will not need surgery and is considered week to week. Max Pacioretty has a similarly unclear return date, but thankfully it doesn't look like it's going to be anything too serious for both of those guys. Maybe more alarming, Alex Pietrangelo has no points and is a -6. Robin Lehner has a .901 save percentage. We talked about before the season whether he could handle this increased load coming in. He's going to start again on Sunday. He's clearly going to be the guy who starts basically every game that's important for the Vegas Golden Knights. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do Sunday night. What's your panic meter rating, Steele, for Vegas?
Yeah, I'm not really concerned at all. It's pretty much at a zero or a 1 right now. And it's because of what we've already talked about. They're missing a lot of key guys in their lineup. Mark Stone and Max Pacioretty, who fill up 2 of the 3 spots on their first line. Alex Tuck, who fills out the bottom 6 as well. Alec Martinez and Zach Whitecloud on the blue line for them. They're both out of the lineup as well. So they're dealing with a bunch of key injuries right now, and they don't have their top guys. And because of Robin Lehner now taking the gears and being the number 1 guy in the crease for the Las Vegas Golden Knights, again, like you said, is he ready for that moment? Is he ready to be the guy for them? I'm not quite sure right now. I love the fact that he got his contract that he's been looking for the last couple of years, but can he be this guy for the Las Vegas Golden Knights? I'm not quite sure right now. But to me, there is not a lot of panic in my voice. I just think that because they're dealing with all these injuries, their top line is pretty much out for the next couple of weeks. They're dealing with a lot of stuff right now. I'm not too worried. They're going to get things going again, like the Chicago Blackhawks in the next week or so.
I love it, Steele. You're not getting too down on some of these teams that we had high hopes for, and I agree with you. I don't think there should be any panic in Vegas right now. I am a little bit concerned about Lehner, like you mentioned. I think that that's maybe the one question mark that they haven't seen proven there, even though he's been really a good goalie for a long period of time. He hasn't really shown that as much as you would expect behind a great team like Vegas. So now that we've touched on some of those floundering teams, let's discuss some teams who have been red hot out of the gate and whether you're buying or selling them as a Stanley Cup contender. We're going to skip right over the Florida Panthers because we both previously pegged them as a contender before their 5-0 start. They look really good. Let's talk about the Edmonton Oilers, whose offseason moves we discussed at length. They're also 5-0. They've had one of the softest schedules to start the season, though. Do you buy or sell the Oilers as contenders, Steele?
I'm buying the Edmonton Oilers. I think they're a tremendous team. McDavid and Draisaitl continue to do what they've done all season long and all last season as well, over their entire careers, basically. So they're taking the reins for the Edmonton Oilers. Zach Hyman is fitting in real nice on that top line and on the power play unit with those 2 guys. And again, you've got guys like Zack Kassian, Jesse Puljujarvi, Warren Fogle, who are really helping on the bottom 6, as well as Puljujarvi playing on the top line as well. But those guys are really, really producing and helping out this Edmonton team. Again, I don't trust Mike Smith when it comes to the playoffs, but this is a contending team for the Stanley Cup. No questions about it.
I'm buying as well, Steele. They look really good early on. The top guns are firing. And like you said, I don't necessarily trust the goalies to get them all the way to the Stanley Cup, but I do think that's a piece that they could add in this season. Let's move on to a recent Cup-winning franchise from St. Louis. They've roared out to a 4-0 start, and that includes wins over both Colorado and Vegas, although both of those teams were missing some key players in those games. Do you buy the Blues rebound this season?
Yeah, I'm buying the Blues again this season. I think we can discuss about Jordan Binnington, about how he struggled last season after winning the Stanley Cup a couple of seasons ago. I think it's a bounce back year for him. I think he's going to get back into his mentality of being the number one goalie for the Blues and being that guy that they can depend on. But look at this, Jordan Kyrou leading the way for the St. Louis Blues with 8 points. You got Tarasenko, 4 points in 4 games for him. They have a really structured team of veteran experience as well as young, talented guys like Jordan Kyrou and a guy like Robert Thomas. So this team is really set and sound structurally with the experience and the young talent they have up front, as well as their blue line is probably one of the best blue lines in the league, I would say. So for me, I'm buying the St. Louis Blues. They're going to be a top team in their division.
Love the depth in St. Louis. I think that everything that went on with Tarasenko in the offseason, it actually ended up helping this team. It seems like the vibe around this team is really good. They kind of cleared the air with whatever issues they had. And you're right, the young guys and the veterans are both contributing right now. They have the look of a scary team. Joining the Blues at the top of the Western Division are your Minnesota Wild, Steel, who started 4-0 heading into Sunday's clash with Nashville. And I would bet they might make that 5-0. They've also benefited from a relatively soft schedule, though. They won all 4 games by a single goal, but they still lit up Winnipeg for 6 goals on Tuesday. And after finishing as one of the league's best offenses last season, the Wild look primed to do it again. So I think we both know this is a great offensive team, but it takes a lot more than that to be a Stanley Cup contender. Are you buying them in that spot?
This is 3 for 3. I'm buying the Minnesota Wild as a cup contender. And this is why I love the Minnesota Wild so much. They don't have that star player who should be Kirill Kaprizov right now. But again, he's not going to be overly the top star player. He's going to be their best player, but he's not going to be like a Connor McDavid who just is 60,000 points away from their second player. So again, the reason why I love the Minnesota Wild so much is they work as a team. Like you said, the first 4 games, they've won by 1 goal. And the reason why they've done this is because they can grind their opponent down. They don't have a lot of all-stars, but they grind you down in the offensive zone. They are really sound on the blue line with their defensive guys. So again, that's the reason why I like them so much. They work together as a team, and they do not rely on individual talent to get the win. It's for the betterment of the team, and they work as a team, and that's why they're 4-0 to start the season. And one of the most underrated teams in the NHL right now, I've got them buying, and they're going to be a real cup contender this season.
I have them just below cup contender status. I need to see it just a little bit more. I'm not overly impressed with what they've done as a team defensively so far. And, you know, you could say the goaltenders could be better. They probably could have been to start this season. And it is impressive that they managed to get wins out of all of them. But this is a young team. I love the depth. I need to see a little bit more, Steel, before I'm buying in. Let's talk about a team that you highlighted in the preseason as one of your favorites. The New York Rangers are on top of the absolutely stacked Metro Division at 4-1-1. Take a look at the Metro Division standings. Now, this might change after Sunday night, but as of we're recording this right now, there isn't a losing team in that entire division. That's obscene. Like, that's hard to even believe when you consider how many intra-division games they've already played. They're just smacking teams around outside of their division. This is going to be a really tight race all to the end. So after getting smacked by Washington 5-1 in their season opener, New York dropped an overtime loss to Dallas the next night. They tightened things up defensively and reeled off 4 straight wins, the most impressive of which was a 2-1 overtime victory against the Leafs. Are you buying or selling the Rangers as cup contenders, Steel?
Let's continue. 4 for 4, buying the New York Rangers here. And this is the way they should have played all season long in 2020-21 season. But unfortunately, again, COVID, they had some problems with Artemi Panarin. He had to go back to Russia. And they just had some problems last season. This is the way they should have started last year. Igor Shesterkin has been phenomenal. 1.53 goals against average with a .953 save percentage. I really think they've got their guys going. Alexis Lafreniere has been a lot better to start this season than the previous season. I think that he's going to be a tremendous asset for them moving forward this season as well. He could be a tremendous asset to pick up in the fantasy league as well if he can continue the play that he has over the last couple of games. But this is one of the teams I was really looking forward to again this season to watch. They're going to be a top team in their division, and I've got them as real cup contenders for the Stanley Cup this year.
Igor Shesterkin is really the wild card for me. They're like right on the fence of contendership to me because, like I said, this is an amazing division. They've looked really good. I do think they're a different and improved team versus last year. But when you look at some of the goaltenders that were drafted high in fantasy drafts this year, it's really Shesterkin is the only guy who is living up to that draft position. Andrei Vasilevsky, 893 save percentage. Robin Leonard, we mentioned him earlier, 901. Darcy Kemper, 894. Connor Hellebuck, 886. And then finally, you have Igor Shesterkin with a 953 save percentage. He basically won that game against the Leafs all by himself. He was fantastic. So I think if Shesterkin can keep this up for the rest of the season, I would buy them as cup contenders. But I need to see that for just a little bit longer from him. I saved the most surprising, and some people out there might say the most ridiculous for last. The San Jose Sharks, they are nipping at the Oilers' heels in the Pacific after reeling off 4 straight wins against Canadian opponents, including the Jets and the Leafs. Now, we almost left them out of this segment after they fell behind big to the Bruins today on Sunday, but they battled back and made it competitive, losing their first game of the season 4-3 to a really good team in Boston. Now, nobody misses Martin Jones thanks to Aiden Hill's solid start in net there. There might be a bit of a Ewing theory factor going on with their last year's top scorer, Evander Kane, being on suspension and not being anywhere around this team. The Sharks have a +8 goal differential even after that loss to Boston, which was 6th best in the league heading into that game. Are you buying or selling this team as a contender?
It's too early to tell. I think they've had a really easy schedule to start the season. All first of their 4 games were against Canadian teams and who really struggled to start the season. So again, it's really too early to tell if they are a cup contender or if they're just pretenders at this point. I think they do have a chance to make the playoffs. I think the Oilers, Canucks, and Golden Knights are the 3 better teams in that division, and then San Jose would finish up in fourth over the rest of the teams in that division. But again, I think it's too early to tell right now. I have really liked what I've seen from Timo Meier. He's been probably their best player for the San Jose Sharks to start this season, and he's going to continue that. He's just been absolutely detrimental to the opponents that the San Jose Sharks play. So again, for me, it's too early to tell, but we'll see what happens later on in the season.
Yeah, I think we might need to see a little bit more success from this team this season to believe it, because they've been really bad the last couple of seasons. But I do want to mention that some of their players are criminally under-rostered in fantasy. Just because I'm not necessarily buying into the team success this year, I think some of these guys have proven in the past they can produce, and they should definitely be rostered this year. Logan Couture, just 58%. He led the team with 7 points with Timo Meier coming into that game with Boston. Of course, they both got on the score sheet again in that one. Maybe most importantly, Erik Karlsson has looked really, really good so far. 6 points in his first 4 games. He was held off against Boston there, but his ownership shot up 17% this week, and he's still only 77% owned. Aiden Hill, who I mentioned, top guy between the pipes there, only 47% owned. So if you're somebody who lost somebody like Matt Murray, maybe need a goaltender, you're in a bit of a pinch, I'd look towards someone like Aiden Hill. And those guys I previously mentioned, I think they can contribute on the offensive side of the ice for sure. Folks, reel in some of those Sharks while they're feasting. That's going to do it for today's episode. On behalf of Steel Road, and I'm David Crosby, and thanks for tuning in to NHL Quick Hits.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 8.